The morning came slow, light sifting through the smoke-streaked windows like mercy through grief. Frost laced the sill. The air held still, as if waiting. In the corner by the hearth, Clara slept upright, her arms wrapped around May, her chin resting against the baby's soft curls. Eli watched from across the room, not moving, not breathing too loud. Something had changed in the night. Not the danger, not the fear, but them. Some cord had tied itself between the three of them, invisible but unbreakable. Not chosen. Just there. He stood and pulled on his coat, heavy with ash and old leather, and stepped out into the brittle hush of the yard. The world was white-tipped and hushed. No tracks, no horses. The fence still stood, splintered but upright. The barn, burned to bones, smoldered no longer. Just blackened timber under pale light. The sky was an empty, pale dome. No birds. He walked the perimeter once. Eyes, sharp, boots crunching through frost and soil. The trap trench near the woods was undisturbed. The wind murmured low through pine and brittle grass, as though whispering secrets it didn't want overheard. By the time he returned, Clara had boiled water, made tea, swept the ashes from the hearth. May was already babbling again, fists batting, the air. Eli smiled at her, the ache in his chest sharp and strange. "Sleep?" Clara asked. He shook his head. "You." She poured him tea, handed it without a word. They sat across from each other, the fire crackling low between them, hands wrapped around tin mugs. "Do you think he'll come again?" she asked finally. Eli's jaw clenched. "Yes, but not today." "How do you know?" "Because, if he was going to, he would have come in the dark. Caleb likes shadows. He doesn't want to fight. He wants fear." She nodded. "Then we give him neither." The decision settled like a stone. Not spoken, but mutual. They wouldn't run, wouldn't hide. They would hold the line with bare hands if need be. By midday, Eli had ridden into town and back, a full day's ride in half, shoulders taut with effort. The sheriff was out chasing horse thieves south of the ridge. Help would be days off, if it came at all. That night, Clara found Eli out by the edge of the woods, staring toward the ridgeline. A flicker of torchlight blinked between trees, then vanished. "They're watching," she said. "Yes." "We could leave." He didn't answer, just stared ahead. Clara stepped beside him, May strapped to her chest in a blanket. "I would go," she said softly, "if you asked, but I won't leave you alone here." He looked at her then, eyes rimmed red, and for a moment, neither of them breathed. "This isn't just land," he whispered. "It's everything I never had. A place where things can grow." Clara looked down at the baby between them. "Then we protect it," she said. "Together." 2 nights later, the final reckoning came. It began with silence. Too much of it. Even the wind held back, as if the world itself knew to stand aside. Eli stood on the porch with the rifle balanced in his arms. Clara sat inside by the hearth, May against her chest, her voice humming that half-lullaby, half-prayer. Something in her eyes had turned from mourning to fire. Then came the sound. Hooves. Many. 6, maybe more. Figures moved out of the dark like memories. Caleb at the front, mounted, wrapped in a black duster that glistened faintly with dew. Behind him, 5 men, all armed, all mean-looking in that quiet, grim way that says they've done worse for less. Eli stepped off the porch. "This land's not yours," he said, calm. Caleb dismounted, tossed his reins aside like he had no intention of leaving. "That's where you're wrong." He walked forward, boots squelching in mud, stopping a few paces from Eli. "You think love makes you strong," he said, voice almost gentle. "It makes you blind." Eli didn't move, didn't speak. "See, you think you found something here. Her, the child, the house, the fence, the fire. but all of it's borrowed. Time, warmth, even blood. Behind him, the men fanned out. Clara stepped onto the porch. "Caleb," she said. His head turned slightly. "You're not a storm. You're not justice. You're just a man who was never held the right way." He sneered. "You gonna shoot me with words?" Eli raised the rifle. Caleb grinned. "There. He is." What followed happened fast. A man moved left, another right. Guns lifted. Eli fired first, shot one man clean through the leg. Clara ducked as a bullet tore through the porch rail. May cried out. The air exploded in sound, shouts, hooves, the sharp report of iron and powder. 2 men fell, one scrambled, wounded. Another fled into the trees. Eli ducked behind the water trough, reloading, vision clouded with smoke. Caleb stepped through it, his gun drawn, pointed at the house. "Enough!" he roared. Clara emerged again, arms empty. May hidden now, safely tucked in the root cellar. "I never hated you," she said. "I pitied you." "Pity's worse than hate," Caleb growled. Eli rose, silent behind him. "You always needed someone to blame," Clara went on. "You never knew how to love." Eli's voice cut in, low and cold. "But I did." Caleb turned, and Eli fired. One clean shot. The outlaw crumpled, not instantly, not like in stories. He fell to his knees first, then toppled sideways. The silence afterward was deep. Clara ran forward, eyes searching. Eli's hand trembled as he lowered the rifle. Blood smeared his shirt, grazed, shoulder hit. Nothing mortal. Behind them, the baby cried again. Alive. Whole. Waiting. They buried the dead by morning, far from the house, marked the graves with simple stones. No names, just rest. In the days that followed, peace didn't rush back in. It crept, like new, grass after fire, like breath after grief. Clara tended the baby and the garden. Eli rebuilt the barn. The scars didn't fade, but the laughter returned, slowly, like a bird testing the wind. One afternoon, weeks later, Clara stood by the fence, May on her hip. She watched Eli hammer the last board into place. Sunlight spilled across the field like forgiveness. "You're not just the man who saved us," she said. He looked up. "You're the man who stayed." Eli walked toward her, stopped inches away, touched May's tiny hand, then Clara's face. "I didn't know I was looking for this," he said, "but I won't ever stop now." The baby giggled. Just a sound, just a note, but it filled the whole field. Eli reached for Clara's hand. She didn't flinch. The 3 of them stood there, battered, stitched together, but unbroken. Roots, they say, grow deeper in rocky soil. And love, the kind that's earned, the kind that takes time and storm and fire, it grows where nothing else dared. Out there, where the wind keeps secrets and the sky never ends, a family formed. Not by blood, but by choice. And choice, dear listener, is the truest kind of love there is. So, if you're watching this, wherever you are, from a high-rise window or dusty backroad town, remember this. Some hearts aren't found. They're made. One act of mercy at a time. If this story held your heart a while, if it made you feel, even a little, leave a comment, share your thoughts, and tell us, where are you watching from? Until next time, may your roots grow deep and your fire stay warm. We'll be here, by the hearth, always waiting for the next story to find its way home. Eli had never known peace could feel so fragile. The days that followed Caleb's visit blurred into a strange quiet, like the calm that comes before the heavens split open with thunder. The wind no longer spoke through the trees. The chickens laid fewer eggs. Even the horses, usually restless and stomping at dusk, stood still in the paddock, ears twitching toward the darkened hills. May, blissfully unaware, gurgled and smiled and reached for Clara's hair when she held her. Her small hand fit so easily around a strand, tugging with all the innocence of someone who had never known loss. Eli watched them sometimes from the edge of the porch or the doorway of the barn and felt something growing inside him. Not just warmth, not just gratitude, but a pull toward them, toward that firelight glow that made the world seem smaller, safer. But the stillness did not last. It started with a missing chicken, then 2. Clara said it might be foxes, but Eli had seen no tracks, and the fence was unbroken. Something was circling them, unseen. One morning, before the sun had fully risen, Eli went to fetch water from the creek. That's when he saw the mark painted in red mud on the side of the barn, a symbol he didn't recognize, a circle split by a jagged line, intentional, deliberate. When he returned, face pale beneath the stubble, Clara saw it in his eyes. "Where?" she asked. "The barn." She didn't ask what it looked like, only nodded and sat down at the table, cradling May close. "Caleb never believed in law," she said quietly. "He believes in messages." Eli set the bucket down harder than he meant to. "What does it mean?" "He's coming back." Clara stood then, not like a woman afraid, but like someone who'd walked through fire before and expected the smoke to rise again. They reinforced the doors that afternoon. Moved May's basket further from the windows. Eli slept with the rifle now, leaned against the edge of the bed, and Clara didn't argue. At night, he could feel her breathing from the other side of the hearth. Slow, steady, but never deep, like someone who'd forgotten how to dream. The storm broke 4 nights later. It began with hoofbeats, distant at first, then closer. A steady rhythm, deliberate. Not a band of men, just one. And when the knock came again, it was the same slow thump as before. Eli opened the door halfway, rifle cradled in one arm. Caleb stood on the porch, hat tipped back, smile gone. "This ain't about the baby," he said. Eli waited. "This is about what's owed." Clara stepped up behind him, voice cool as Riverstone. "You've never done a day's work that didn't. Bleed someone else, Caleb." What could possibly be owed you? Caleb's eyes flicked to her, then to the rifle in Eli's hands. "You've always been good with words," he said, "but words don't feed a man." You were fed. You were housed. You were forgiven. "Forgiveness," he spat, "isn't a roof." Eli took a half step forward. "You have 10 seconds to leave this land," he said quietly. "Then I stop asking." Caleb studied him. Then he looked past them again, toward the crib, barely visible behind the hearth. "You think love makes a man brave," he said, "but you ain't her blood, and that baby ain't yours." He turned then, slowly, and walked back into the darkness, the sound of his horse fading like a nightmare at dawn. They didn't sleep that night. Clara sat with May in her arms, rocking slowly. Eli paced the floor, watching every shadow. At sunrise, they found the barn burned. Nothing remained of the feed. The hay was ash. The horses gone. Clara didn't cry. She didn't scream. She stood in the smoke, barefoot and still, the wind catching the hem of her dress like it might lift her off the ground. Eli put a hand on her shoulder. She didn't move away. "He means to bleed us dry," he said. Clara looked up at him, and something ancient lived in her eyes. Not fear, not even fury, just tired sorrow. "Then he'll learn," she said. "We're made of sterner things than bone." They made a plan that day, not to fight, but to last. Eli dug a trench near the tree line and filled it with scrap, nails, broken glass, old tools rusted to ruin. Clara boarded the back window and stashed extra food in the root cellar. The rifle stayed within reach. Always, and still, May smiled, as if the world was soft and safe and new. That night, as the wind picked up and the oil lamp flickered, Eli sat beside Clara on the floor, their backs against the wall. May slept in the basket near the hearth. "She thinks you're her mother," he said again. Clara didn't reply at first. Then, "I was married once." He waited. He wasn't cruel, not like Caleb, but he was weak, and weakness. It takes from you, one small cut at a time. She glanced at him, the lamplight catching her face in golden shadow. "I lost a child," she whispered. "Before May." Eli's breath caught. "Not by blood," she added. "She was left on our doorstep. No name, no cry, just a ribbon around her wrist." Her voice faltered. "She only lived 6 days, and in that time I felt more like a mother than I ever had with my husband. When she died, he told me not to make a fuss, said it was best she'd gone early. I buried her in the orchard." The silence after that felt like a prayer. Eli reached out, hesitated, then took her hand. It was cold and trembling. "She didn't die unloved," he said. "No," Clara murmured, "but I did. For a long time after." The wind howled outside. A shutter slammed, then footsteps, not one, several, crunching over frost-hardened dirt. Eli stood, rifle ready. Clara lifted May and held her close, back pressed to the wall. A voice called out. "Clara," Caleb said, slow and clear. "You said I was a coward. Maybe I was. But cowards learn." She stepped forward, fearless. "I'm not hiding." "No," Caleb replied. "But you're still running, still pretending that baby don't belong to a grave." The words hit like ice. Eli stepped forward. "Leave now, Caleb." "I won't say it again," Caleb barked. "That baby's not yours. You want to play house with someone else's child? Fine. But I'll be damned if I let you turn her into some symbol of your clean little life." There was a click. Metal on metal. Eli didn't hesitate. He fired once, high, warning shot. The hoofbeats scattered. He fired again, and again. Then silence. They stood in that silence for what felt like hours. When it finally broke, it was with May's cry. Clara rushed to soothe her, rocking gently, lips brushing the baby's forehead. Eli shut the door, set the rifle down, and turned. Clara was singing, a low, broken melody. Not quite lullaby, not quite hymn. May nestled in, and slowly, her crying stopped. Eli walked to them, dropped to his knees. "I'll fix the fence tomorrow," he said softly, "and get word to the next town. Sheriff needs to know." Clara looked down at him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "No one's coming to save us," she said. "But maybe we can save each other." Outside, the wind finally changed. The clouds shifted, and somewhere in the distance, the first snowflake fell, a fragile, fleeting promise of what could come next. The days passed like slow-moving clouds over the prairie, quiet, unhurried, but never still. Eli rose each morning before the frost had faded, tended to the broken fences and the leaning barn, chopped wood until his arms ached. The work was simple, but not thankless. Clara never praised, but she never dismissed either. Her silence was not cold, just cautious, like a hand hovering above a wound not yet ready to be touched. May thrived. Her color came back first, pink rising to her, cheeks like the bloom of a desert rose. Then the sounds, soft coos, gurgles, little fists waving in the air like she was chasing sunlight. Every morning, Eli brought her in, and Clara fed her with the same quiet focus, the same cradling arms. And every morning, he found himself lingering a little longer. He did not ask questions. Not about the small box of old letters Clara kept tucked under the hearth. Not about the faded photograph that sometimes appeared on the mantel, then disappeared the next day. not about the single pair of worn baby shoes tied with ribbon, hanging from a nail above the door. And she didn't ask about him. They moved, like two ghosts in the same house, occasionally brushing past each other but never touching. Yet something was shifting. Eli felt it in the way Clara began setting out a second plate at supper, in how she left the back door unlatched when the wind turned sharp, in the way she sometimes reached for May slower than before, allowing him an extra heartbeat with her in his arms. He didn't know how to speak of what was happening. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was its shadow, the warm hint of something, human in the silence between them. One morning, the air held the first taste of winter, cold enough to stiffen his joints, sharp enough to make May's little nose crinkle when the door opened. Eli brought her in early, wrapped in extra cloth. Clara was at the table, hands dusted in flour, kneading dough with that same focused strength. She didn't look up when he came in. "She's restless today," he said softly. Clara wiped her hands on her apron and turned. "Babies know when change is coming," she murmured, taking May and pressing her close. "Storm in the bones. They feel it before we do." Eli watched as she settled into the rocking chair, coaxing May into a rhythm. The child nestled into her like she'd been born of her. There was no awkwardness, no hesitation, just a deep, quiet knowing, the kind that cannot be taught. "You'd never know she wasn't yours," he said without thinking. Clara's body stilled. Her eyes didn't meet his. "She isn't," she replied, voice like brittle leaves. "I didn't mean," he began, then trailed off. "You didn't have to." The silence returned, heavier than before. But it didn't linger. Later that day, while splitting kindling, Eli spotted something on the ridge, a flicker of movement, too quick for a deer, too upright for a fox. He stood still, the axe loose in his hand. Nothing more followed. But the feeling didn't leave. That night, he moved May's basket closer to his cot in the barn, sleeping with one ear turned toward the wind. The horses were restless, the coyotes too quiet. By morning, his breath clouded in front of him. Clara opened the door with tired eyes and let him in without a word. He handed May over, but his hands lingered this time. Clara glanced up at him. Neither spoke. Then came the knock. A low, steady thump on the front door. Not urgent, not hesitant, just measured. Clara's body went rigid. She shifted May to one arm and reached for the rifle leaning beside the hearth. Eli moved instinctively between her and the door. He opened it slow. The man standing there wore a wide grin and a coat that hadn't seen honest work in years. His boots were polished. His eyes were hard. A revolver hung lazy at his hip, but not forgotten. "Well now," the stranger drawled, "a man answers. Ain't that something?" Eli didn't move. "What do you want?" The man's grin widened. "Heard tell a woman was living up here all alone. Was passing through. Thought I'd offer." A neighborly how-do. Clara stepped forward, rifle firm against her shoulder. "Move along, Caleb." The man's grin faltered for half a second, then returned. "Clara," he said as if tasting the name. "Didn't recognize you without the apron and the bruises." Eli felt something electric in the air then. Not anger, not fear. Something older, like buried pain clawing up through the dirt. "You know him?" he asked without turning. Clara didn't blink. "He was my husband's brother." Caleb chuckled. "Was and is, darling. You forget how families work?" Eli tightened his grip on the doorframe. "You're not welcome here," Clara said. "Oh, I don't want much," Caleb said, looking past them toward the fire. "Just came to see the baby." The silence that followed was a void. Eli stepped forward. "There's nothing here for you." Caleb's eyes met his, hard now, unsmiling. "You're trespassing, friend." Eli didn't flinch. "And you're breathing borrowed air." The door shut in his face. Clara locked it, then sagged back against the wall. May still clutched tight. "You should have let me shoot him," she whispered. Eli said nothing, just stood there, the echo of Caleb's voice still thick in the room. Later, after May had fallen asleep and Clara had gone quiet by the fire, Eli sat beside her. "You didn't tell me," he said. Clara stared into the flames. "Didn't see the use." "Is he dangerous?" "More to himself than others," she said, then added, "Usually." Eli nodded slowly. "He won't be back," he said, but neither of them believed it. That night, Eli stayed in the cabin. Clara didn't object. May stirred twice, and each time Clara rose to soothe her. Eli watched her, watched how her body curved protectively, how her voice softened like old linen, how May responded with a trust so pure it hurt to see. "She already thinks you're her mother," he said quietly. Clara's eyes met his in the dim firelight. "I don't know how to be," she admitted. Eli leaned forward. "You already are." The next day dawned too quiet. No birdsong, no wind, just a stillness that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Eli walked the perimeter of the property 3 times before breakfast. Nothing moved, not even the clouds. Inside, Clara was humming, a lullaby without words, something that felt like it had been passed down through centuries. May kicked her legs in the air, smiling. Eli leaned in the doorway, arms crossed. "I want to stay," he said. Clara's hands paused. "Not for a few days, not for May, for you." She didn't answer. "I won't ask for anything," he added. "Just let me be here. Let me choose this." Clara looked up at him. The hardness in her eyes had softened, but not disappeared. "I don't know if I can give what you want," she said, barely above a whisper. "I'm not asking for anything," he replied. "Not yet. Just don't send me away." The fire crackled. May giggled. Clara nodded, once. Outside, the stillness remained, but inside something stirred. Not yet safety, but perhaps the beginning of home. The prairie stretched out like an old quilt left in the sun too long, frayed, faded, and whispering stories only the wind could remember. The day was dying in bruised colors, clouds heavy with silence, and beneath them a lone rider leaned low. In the saddle, his face shadowed beneath a dusty hat brim. He cradled something small against his chest, wrapped tight in a threadbare blanket. Too quiet to be sleeping, too still to be well. Eli's lips were cracked, and his eyes stung from the wind, but he pressed forward. The horse's gait was uneven, limping from a thrown shoe 2 towns back, but there'd been no time to fix it. Not with the baby's breath growing shallower by the hour. A sliver of smoke curled on the horizon, soft as a sigh. A homestead, not much to look at. Just a squat cabin leaning into the hill, fences half fallen, and a chimney coughing out a tired thread of warmth. But to Eli, it was salvation or nothing. The horse gave a final grunt as he dismounted, legs trembling. He barely noticed the ache. In his knees as he staggered toward the door, the bundle clutched tighter now, as if the motion alone could breathe life back into it. He raised a fist to knock, but the door opened before he could. A woman stood framed in the doorway, outlined by amber firelight. Not young, not old. Her face wore the kind of beauty shaped more by storms than sunlight. Her apron was dusted in flour, her hands still smudged with it. But her eyes, gray, clear, sharp as a winter creek, took him in without flinching. His voice broke before it even formed. Milk," he rasped. "She needs milk." Her gaze slid down to the bundle, the smallest flicker of emotion crossing her features. Not pity, something deeper, quieter, like the memory of a wound that never closed right. She said nothing. just stepped back. Eli crossed the threshold like a man trespassing on sacred ground. The warmth hit him first, then the smell of wood smoke and bread, and something else too, something almost holy. The baby whimpered, then quieted again. Too quiet. The woman closed the door gently behind him. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the chair nearest the hearth. He obeyed, lowering himself with care, eyes never leaving her. She didn't ask questions, didn't offer comfort. She merely knelt by the fire, reached for a worn quilt and laid it beside her. Then she turned to him and said softly, "Give her to me." Eli hesitated, not out of mistrust, but fear. Fear of what it meant to let go, even for a moment. Still, he offered her the child. She took the baby like she'd done it 100 times. No fuss, no flinch. Her arms folded around the infant with a tenderness that stunned him, like watching someone remember who they used to be. "She's burning," the woman murmured. "How long's she been like this?" "Since maybe before," he croaked. "She won't take the bottle. I tried. She just won't." The woman didn't look at him. She simply held the baby close, pressing the little body to her breast. Eli blinked, stunned, unsure if he should turn away or stay rooted to the floor. "She won't latch," he said, a note of desperation rising. "She will," the woman whispered. "Give her time." And she did. Long minutes passed. The only sound, the soft rustling of fabric, the baby's mouth eventually drawing rhythm from instinct. Eli let out a shuddering breath he didn't know he'd been holding. His eyes burned again, but from something else now, something unspoken. "I'm Eli," he said, voice rough. The woman didn't respond. "She ain't mine," he added. "The baby." Still silence. Wagon was hit, out past the canyon. I found her under what was left. Her ma didn't make it. None of 'em did. He swallowed. I couldn't leave her. Finally, the woman looked at him, not with judgment, just the kind of stillness that waits out storms. "I'm Clara," she said. Eli nodded once. "Thank you." She glanced down at the child again, who had begun to doze, mouth still pressed against her, face slack with relief. "Storm coming," Clara said, standing with the baby still in her arms. "You'll sleep in the barn." Eli blinked. "I can ride once she's fed." Clara's voice was calm but final. "You'll sleep in the barn." He didn't argue. Outside, the wind began to rise. The barn smelled of hay and old stories, wood creaking like it remembered better days. Clara brought him a lantern and a thin blanket. No more than that. She handed May. He had begun calling. The baby, that, in his head, at least, back to him without ceremony. "She'll need feeding again by sunrise," Clara said. "You come back then." He nodded, hands clumsy with the child again. As she turned to leave, he found himself speaking. "You got children?" Clara paused in the doorway. "Had," she said, and then she was gone, the wind swallowing her footsteps. Eli sat in the dark for a long time. May stirred in his arms but didn't cry. The storm broke around midnight, thunder low and growling, like an old beast waking from sleep. Rain pelted the roof in waves, and somewhere across the hills, coyotes began to howl. He didn't sleep much. The barn walls groaned, the cold seeped through the thin blanket, and May whimpered often. But each time he thought she'd begin to cry, she quieted herself, almost as if remembering the warmth she'd known just hours before. Come dawn, Eli walked back to the house, boots heavy with mud. Clara opened the door before he knocked. "She's hungry," he said. Clara reached for the baby again. This time, Eli hesitated. "She calmed with you," he murmured, like she knew. Clara nodded once. Babies remember softness, even when they've barely had it. He handed May over, slower now. Watched as Clara settled in the same chair by the fire, her movements methodical, gentle. The baby stirred, latched. Eli lingered. "You want me gone after this?" Clara didn't answer right away. Her gaze stayed on the child as if she feared looking up would break whatever fragile thing hung in the air between them. "You can stay in the barn," she said at last, "just till she's stronger." Eli's breath caught, surprised. "I'll work," he offered quickly. "Chop wood, mend what needs. I didn't ask for help. I know." Clara glanced at him then, not unkindly, just with the weariness of someone who's heard promises before and learned not to lean on them. "Just don't lie," she said, "and don't bring trouble to my door." Eli nodded once, solemn. "I won't." The fire cracked. Rain dripped from the eaves. May let out a soft sound halfway between a sigh and a dream. And for the first time since the wagon turned to splinters, Eli felt the quiet press of something unfamiliar curling around his chest. Not safety. Not yet, but the beginning of it. Outside, the storm moved on, but the scent of it lingered, and inside the house, a baby slept.